Kurds accused of forcing Arabs from their homes in Iraq. Amnesty International says the mass displacement could amount to a war crime as the Iraqi government is pressured to protect civilians from unrelenting violence. Iraq, the ongoing bloodshed and the dismantling of its social fabric. This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. They are among the most trusted allies of the international coalition in the fight against ISIL in Iraq, benefiting from military and political support. But Kurdish fighters are being accused of deliberately destroying thousands of Arab homes under their control. In another sign that the diverse society in Iraq is breaking down, Amnesty International says Kurdish forces have campaigned to forcibly displace Arab communities, bulldozing and blowing up Arab villages they've recaptured from ISIL. It's being seen as revenge for perceived Arab support for ISIL. And Amnesty says the Kurdish actions could amount to war crimes. Well, Amnesty isn't the only group tracking the impact of war on Iraqis. A new UN report has documented what it calls a staggering level of violence. Nearly 19,000 civilians have been killed in Iraq, roughly over the last 2 years. More than 3 million Iraqis have been forced from their homes, and the United Nations says the worst excesses were committed by ISIL fighters. Some alleged abuses were also carried out by Iraqi troops, militias, and Kurdish forces. Well, Iraq's Prime Minister has vowed to fight anyone who fuels sectarian division. Haider al-Abadi made the pledge during a visit to the town of Muqtadiya. It's where government-backed Shia Muslim fighters have attacked Sunni-owned businesses and mosques. Those same groups are supposed to be responsible for security following the eviction of ISIL fighters.
Any weapon out of the control of the state is in the hands of ISIL or those who support them. All of these weapons threaten citizens, security and people's properties. And those who carry such weapons are supporting ISIL fighters.
Well, for more on this, I am joined by our guests. In London, we have Donatella Rivera, who is the Senior Crisis Response Advisor for Amnesty International. Donatella authored the Amnesty report, in fact, and led the investigation on the ground. In Washington, D.C., Rahman Aljebouri, Senior Program Officer for Middle East and North Africa for the National Endowment for Democracy. And in London, we have Rebwar Fatah, who is the founder and managing director of the Middle East Consultancy. Rebwar is a specialist on Kurdish affairs. Welcome to you all. Good to see you here. Donatella, I'd like to start with you. Let's start with this Amnesty report. It is called The Forced Displacement and Deliberate Destruction in Northern Iraq, Banished and Dispossessed. You gathered testimony from more than 100 eyewitnesses and victims. Tell us more about what you found.
Yes, obviously the testimonies that I gathered on the ground are only part of the story. More important is the evidence that I've seen with my own eyes in so many villages where very widespread destruction took place. In some cases, nothing remained of an entire village, not a single structure. And I'm talking about not the kind of destruction or damage that has occurred in the context of the fighting, in the heat of the battle. I am talking here about destruction that happened deliberately, weeks and months after these specific areas were firmly in the control of the Peshmerga forces. I give you one example. Some of the villages in the northwest near Sinjar, between Sinjar and Mosul, Chiri, Sibaya, Khazuqa, Khabari. I was there last April and the houses had been almost all burned down a few months earlier under the watch of the Peshmerga by a Yazidi militia, but the houses were still standing and they could have been repaired. I went back at the end of November, so 2 months ago, and the villages had been bulldozed. And if you look at the satellite imagery that we have obtained for these villages, it shows very clearly what happened. So, you know, it's no good. The Kurdish authorities, a few minutes ago, I saw a response from somebody to whom we wrote a month ago, and he never responded, but he issued a response now saying it's all wrong and it's not true. The evidence is incontrovertible.
Right,
and I'm ready to go
say,
back to those places with anybody and show them what we're talking about.
Sure, they say the allegations are false. It was a spokesman for the Peshmerga who said the allegations are false and the destruction has been caused by their enemies, ISIL?
Well, as I said, the cases that are cited and documented and investigated in this report are not, I repeat, not cases where the damage occurred in the context of fighting or in the context of airstrikes by coalition forces. These are places that were burned down, bulldozed, weeks and months after they were in the firm control of the Peshmerga forces.
And in your assessment, why has this happened?
There seem to be two reasons, and I'm basing this simply on what I'm being told by some Kurdish authority officials and some Peshmerga, speaking off the record. On the one hand, there are very sweeping allegations such as, oh, those villages supported ISIS. Which is not an acceptable reason, because the people of those villages whose home have been destroyed are living in the areas that are controlled by the Kurdish authorities. So if they have any specific accusation against them, they can arrest them and bring them to justice. Destroying their homes, it's not acceptable. Another reason that comes up is that these villages, all of them, without exception, are in the disputed areas to the south of the Kurdish-controlled semi-autonomous territory. These areas have been disputed for many decades. And now, since the Iraqi army fled the northern Iraq in 2014, the Peshmerga have been controlling those areas. And some Kurdish official told me, well, we are just taking back what used to be ours. Because, of course, we all know that during the reign of Saddam Hussein, there was displacement of Kurds and an encouragement for Arabs to settle. But certainly, one cannot think of solving abuses that occurred decades ago by repeating the same abuses today. So such conduct is not acceptable on any count.
All right, well, let's bring in a specialist on Kurdish affairs, Rebwar Fatah, in London. How do you assess this report?
I mean, obviously, the report based on extensive evidence. I don't think anyone can deny those allegations. However, I'm not really surprised, because the conflict in Iraq has been deeply ethno-sectarian, and the more we move into the history, the more ethno-sectarian it will get. So this is a result of the fact that Iraq, with all its different powers operating in it, failed to provide civilians with stability. I mean, I'm not really surprised at all, and that's maybe that strip is not the only place that these atrocities happening.
No, certainly not the only place where atrocities are happening. But why do you think? Why do you think this is happening? Do you think this is retribution? This is reclaiming land that was taken from them during the so-called Arabization under Saddam Hussein?
I think that there are a number of reasons. Some of them you mentioned, others. Peshmerga forces try to take revenge of ISIS, and the Peshmerga forces are same as all the other military forces in Iraq, are not trained, are not under the same command and control. They are not aware of code of conduct of conflict and war. They are not trained, so it is because they were not really prepared for such a conflict. They were just trained to keep the security of their own region, and suddenly facing an outside conflict, especially against a very substantial army of Islamic State, insurgent Islamic State. So they simply don't know how to behave, and maybe other reasons. Some of these villages, as your speaker earlier said, were harboring, if you like, insurgents from Islamic States. When the Peshmerga forces move in, they try to take revenge. There are a vast number
keeping security
of reasons
against that sort of situation is one thing, but bulldozing whole villages, flattening them, is entirely another. I mean, that's extreme to say the least.
I mean, I don't disagree. I'm not really aware of that evidence, but of course it has been reported, so it must happen. I mean, on a number of occasions, Peshmerga forces stated that when ISIS left these areas behind, they are all booby-trapped, so they have to clean it up. That's one explanation given to me, but I am not aware exactly the reason for destruction of a village or an area that's under their control. I don't understand why they have done that. There might be some security reason also, that they fear that maybe ISIS fighters can move into these areas at night, but I'm trying to understand why you destroy a place which is under your control.
Right. Okay. Well, let's go to Washington, D.C. now. We can speak to Rahman Aljebouri. What's your viewpoint about what's happened in the north of Iraq?
Good afternoon. First, we have to be direct to the truth and reality. Revenge is part of the region, part of the culture of the region. But if we want to talk about the real reason for leveling these houses and homes and bulldozering, it has to deal with the future more than the past, more than with the fight of ISIS right now. It is literally the conflict in Iraq right now. Each race in Iraq tried to draw their borders for the future, for the leveling of the house on the disputed area. So the Kurdistan Peshmerga, or I wouldn't say the Peshmerga, they get instruction from upper political leaders to level these houses, so to draw the border of Kurdistan for the future. So leveling these houses, claim it to Kurdistan, and waiting for what is the political process going to lead to in the next probably 6 to 12 months. So claiming this land is part of the bigger state of Kurdistan, the future state of Kurdistan.
So you mean that the people are taking advantage, the different groups are taking advantage of war to extend their lands, to extend their influence?
Everybody is selling their future dream and they're fighting ISIS right now. If it is the Shia or it is the Sunni or it is even the Kurds. Everybody using the circumstances of fighting Daesh to claim something for the future. And it is easy to sell it international, it is easy to sell it locally, it is easy to sell it on the regional level. But the real fight and the real conflict is about the future, not about the situation right now.
Donatello, ultimately, of course, at some point, we hope that there will be a resolution to the whole Iraq crisis, but you wonder how it will ever be possible, given what we're seeing here and what you saw with your own eyes and what's going on in the sectarian divides right across the country.
Yes, and I mean, Amnesty International has reported over the past year and a half about the attacks by ISIS on the religious and ethnic minority. It has reported on the crimes by the Shia militias. So, certainly the Kurdish forces are not the only one to be committed in violation of international law. Certainly these abuses that leave entire community alienated, dispossessed, and disenfranchised, this can only make an already very tense situation where very real intercommunal, interethnic, interreligious tensions are there and have become more acute over the past year and a half. This can only make them even more acute. I mean, quite apart from having lost their homes and their possession, there's thousands and thousands of villagers have also lost, for the most part, their livelihood, because most of them were farmers or herders. And now, with their homes, with the village, gone is the land that used to feed their families. So it's also creating an enormous amount of grievance, of resentment in a region that, frankly, it's already a powder keg in every respect, because people are fighting for identity, people are fighting for territory, people are fighting for the resources that come with the territory. oil being a very important one, and oil being present in part of these disputed territories.
Right, and that's it's a powder keg. Forgive me for jumping in, but it's a powder keg as illustrated by this UN report, which documents, as I quote, the staggering level of violence. 19,000 civilians killed in 2 years, 3 million Iraqis forced from their homes. Rahman Aljebouri, if I can come to you, unlawful killings, abductions, bombings, mass graves. It is a tragic litany of a failed state, isn't it?
The state of Iraq is a failed state. You know, the government and the official army has no power or no control on the militia or the Peshmerga. You know, basically, it is really not the crisis of identity. It is basically also a crisis of the Sunni became a nation of IDPs right now. There is 2 or 3 million Sunnis scattered all over Iraq, from Baghdad to the Kurdistan area to everybody. The government has no control. The government has really no power on the military or the militia or the Peshmerga. So the government is just a structure. Everybody benefits from that structure because it is weak structure, allowing them to do what they want to do.
So when the Prime Minister Abadi says that he's made a promise he will surely be unable to keep, hasn't he? That he will sort out this sectarian divide, that he will fight anyone who fuels it. That's just pie in the sky, isn't it?
You know, I think this is for the media, you know, more than anything else. I mean, again, the news came yesterday before, is like even the Minister of Interior went to the north of Babylon or Halla and almost kidnapped by a small militia and negotiate his way out. News this morning talking about even the Minister of Defense almost get kidnapped yesterday or before in a Sadr city. You know, these are the news. These are the head of the security forces. If they cannot protect themselves, how are they going to protect the country, or how are they going to get you know, control over these militia or the Peshmerga? And let's be honest, you know, the Peshmerga is not getting their order or instruction from Al-Abadi, and also the Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi or the Shia militia is not getting their order from Al-Abadi. So Al-Abadi is basically talking as a head of a state, but in reality he has no power, he has no teeth or control on his forces.
So Rebwar, Fatah, is that how you assess Prime Minister Abadi's comments?
I think President Abadi the Prime Minister Abadi hasn't really got the power. They might have the mandate, but not the power. I mean, probably the Shia militia have more power over Abadi. And I would say, like an Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani will have more power over Shia militia groups than Abadi himself. Because let us not forget all the Shia militia groups, and their structure is very, very complicated, and there are too many of them. They all work differently. They don't work to any ethics. They don't have any codes of conduct. So they go to villages and they do whatever they want to do. And there are many stories, which is very well documented by all human rights organizations, that single Sunni males are always at risk, even if they are just passing through a checkpoint which is manned by Shia militia groups. And there are towns, probably Jurf al-Sakhar was one of them, that thousands of its Sunni population evacuated without allowing them to go back in. And there are reports that Sunni villages from Diyala governorate are not allowed to go back in. Many accuse that because they don't want Sunnis to be neighbors to Iran. It's like the violation is really tremendous, and it's grave human rights violations.
Right.
And,
there are certainly appalling human rights violations. And my question is, if Abadi's hands are tied, who is going to resolve this?
Abadi cannot resolve the problem. When he came to power, he tried to have this reform package, but he didn't really go very far because his power is limited. And I don't think anybody else or any other organization, whether it's the Iraqi parliament, whether the Iraqi government, whether it's the judiciary, nobody can solve that problem. Iraq, in brief, is in a very, very complicated situation, and is more working towards establishing a Shia-dominated state than a state, a modern state that provides security and safety and establish citizenship. Because Shia militia groups are, as I said, led by Iranian Republican Guards, and also they fight in Syria. I mean, I have to question, Iraq is in a in a very complicated situation, security situation, and they're still trying to keep Assad in power. And also the links with Hezbollah of Lebanon.
Okay,
it's
listen, I'm going to wrap you up because we're running out of time. I just want to bring in our other two guests. One final question each. Rahman Aljebouri, do you agree with that, first of all? And do you think anything can dilute this ongoing hatred and division between Sunni, Shia and Kurds?
Well, there is a solution always. There is, there is a political solution. I think it has to be involve the UN and the United States and sit with as a broker with the Iraqi political leaders to settle it politically. If we don't settle it politically, we are not going to settle it by guns. One. Second, I think everybody right now try to expand their area. The Shia try to expand, secure Baghdad, the belt of Baghdad, take some control on Salahuddin and Diyala because there are Shia population there too. And it has to be with the external. I think, what Iraqis themselves talking about, the war of gas pipes, which is they think the Iranian gas pipe will go through the western end of Iraq to Syria. So these militia try to pave the way for that gas pipeline to be putting in this area. The more Shia will have, the more will protect that pipe going through Iraq to Syria.
Donatella, reports like the UN one that I was just itemizing there, like yours from Amnesty International, dreadful though they are and the misery that they depict, and important though they are in the sense that everybody does need to know about them, does it depress you when you think about, they get released, these reports, but actually does it make any difference when they come out?
Well, if it doesn't make any difference, it's because there is a lack of political will, both in the country and outside. And the reason for publishing these reports, it is specifically to give recommendation to those concerned to actually take actions that can change the situation. First and foremost, our recommendations are addressed to the Kurdistan regional government, which has a greater degree of control over that area than the mess that is happening further south in Baghdad and around. And it can impose a certain code of conduct on its forces, because even in war, not everything is permitted. And while recognizing the important role that the Kurdistan authorities have played in hosting many of the displaced in Iraq, and the role that the Peshmerga forces have played in holding the line against ISIS, that does not give them a license to then go and destroy entire villages and carry out this sort of action. And secondly, part of our recommendations are also addressed to the international community, notably members of the US-led coalition, like the United Kingdoms and Germany, who have been very active in supporting the Kurdish forces, specifically military support, for them to use their good offices to raise concern about this kind of behavior, which doesn't advance the country in any way whatsoever, and also to make sure that any of the military assistance that they provide is not going to be used in any way to commit these or other kinds of violations of international law.
All right, that's it. That's all we've got time for. Interesting talking to you all about this very important issue. Thank you very much, Donatella Rovera, Rebwar Fatah, and Rahman Aljebouri. Appreciate that very much. Thank you. And thanks, as always, for watching. You can leave your comments on the programmes page of our website, aljazeera.com, and you can post your views on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or just tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the rest of the team, it's goodbye.